Hey guys, it's the Conic, and in this one we're going to be talking a bit about a few varying topics. So even if you are not playing the build in this build in particular, i.e. dominating blow, this video is going to be structured in a way where everybody can get value. Now the idea here was going to be just an update video, but I'm going to go one step further and talk a bit about my thought process going from the low to medium budget and medium budget to high budget. The idea here is, instead of just going over what I changed, I want to highlight the things you need to get down to go through the different stages and how you should be looking at build guides going forward to kind of get a decent idea as to what to prioritize and what you can maybe forego in the upgrade process, at least so you have more currency. Now this video is going to have two folds. I'm going to be talking in relation to my current build, but hopefully the ideas we're talking about again carry over to other builds. If you haven't already, do consider liking and subscribing, as it helps the channel out a lot. Now to start off, what does the low budget is basically the budget I put together to be what you're fresh out of campaign budget, right? So we are trying to get as much power as we can from the tree without relying on as many jewels and as many just rares you can buy for, you know, as cheap as you can. Essentially, that is the idea behind most low budgets, because you don't, for the most part, you don't plan to have currency because you're just starting the league. So going to the medium budget, the first thing you would instantly notice is, up until this point, you may be using unnatural strength for the chaos damage, or you might have even shifted to physical damage so you can get your trial master ascendancy. This means if you're doing physical damage, there is a lot of damage to be gotten by converting to chaos damage. But if you're doing chaos damage, then you definitely want to be going for the quality of life that is trial master in going to the medium budget. But you might run into a problem, and that is you cannot have more than 8 ascendancy points. So something has to go, and the two choices are either unnatural strength and mistress of sacrifice. Why? Because mindless aggression builds into both of them, so you can't get rid of it, and bone barrier is too big of a defensive boost for you to even think about foregoing it. So these two become the things to leave, and you have to weigh the options of what goes. In this case, we are removing mistress of sacrifice because it is the easier one to remove its benefits. What do I mean? The biggest benefits of mistress of sacrifice is that you can use bone offering and use that to cap your block. But now that we are dropping mistress of sacrifice in favor of damage, we have to replace that block from somewhere, because otherwise our defenses are going to fall and our damage goes up, and that's not going to be comfortable enough for a medium budget switch. That might feel like a downgrade in many situations. So how does the POB go about fixing this issue? It's the same thing I did in game, of course, but we decide to choose a red nightmare. This red nightmare converts all sources of fire resistance in its radius to block attack damage at half of its value. And you will notice that here there is elemental resistances on these nodes, so it's converting all of that to all the fire res in there to block, or it's also getting block. It's not converting because you still get the res. And we are also employing some fire res status to also increase the amount of block we can get from this one draw. This solves block-ish, and then we also get some more block in this area. Now with block solved, we no longer need mistress of sacrifice, and as such we completely mitigate the downside of dropping mistress of sacrifice. Now there's also skill effect duration that is a downside, but it is not such a big downside that we have to worry too much about it in any case. So now we've talked a bit about the block side of things, so now we've just gained damage from going to chaos damage. Now how else can we upgrade to the medium budget? Because that's not the only thing we changed in going from the low budget to the medium budget. So then you look at your items. We are now using a bone meld. What does bone meld offer? It gives +2 to level of all minion skills. We lose Jinx Juju, which was a very nice defensive boost, but this also comes with increased defenses, so it's very nice. And it also helps us really boost our minion survivability by giving them our resistance, so that is always very, very welcome. We're also going for extra mods on each item, so now we're able to get more life. We're able to pick up more helpful stats like physical damage reduction and eldritch implicits, things like that. So that all goes into the damage. But then you would also notice that we are using a Fortress Covenant and a Watcher's Eye. These are upgrades where it is very nice to have them. Watcher's Eye is going to be very good for defenses, Fortress Covenant for offenses. However, you will need the points to allocate it. And if you're not level 96, you might also have issues because you cannot take all the points. So now it becomes a priority situation. What takes priority over what, and how is there any ways you can counter some of the downsides of these decisions, if you will? Ways you could potentially think about doing that is, for example, you could potentially pass through here and save like a point here. Or what I did, because I couldn't afford 5 red tattoos at the time, I just completely skipped on the large cluster, and instead I went for some block here to make up for that downside. My in-game character is still not in the same spot as the POB, and the reason being is I'm farming Settlers of Kagura, so I felt the need for chance to open nearby chests when you cast a spell, because it's very comfortable with lost shipments, but that's a side conversation. Anyways, so those are the things you should be thinking about when switching. You don't necessarily need all the pieces, but you need to have a solid plan as to how to mitigate or how to switch over without accumulating more downsides. And again, in this situation, more downsides include things like losing block or losing life. Sometimes between POBs you might lose life, you might lose certain things which is a build decision, but other times it is just genuinely a decision you can potentially skip. Now I'll give you another example. Going from the medium budget to the high budget is going to be a life loss, so it is not a switch that you just take lightly. We go from 6k life there to 4k life here because now we're using more unique, so we have less say over the stats on it, and we're also dual wielding sword and we're skipping shield. Now this switching from shield to a sword obviously has its implications, the biggest of which is that now we can no longer use these nodes because they offer bonuses while you are holding a shield, and we are no longer holding a shield. So these are the kind of situations or changes that you really want to pay attention to when switching from the different budgets in any build guide you're following, not just mine, by the way. You need to see what it is they drop and what it is they gain to be able to make the best informed decision as to what you as a player in that moment can do. For example, there's a reason I wanted to make this video now, and that is because today I will likely be moving towards the high budget. I do not have a mage blood yet. I don't think I need a mage blood to switch to this version. However, this version does have a mage blood, so there are going to be things I would have to think about when switching without a mage blood, and I'll give you some examples. What belt am I going to use since I don't have a mage blood? The answer is simple: Darkness Enthroned. I'm just going to keep using what I'm using. Now, because I'm using a Darkness Enthroned, that means all the things that these flasks solve, I have to find ways around them. So for example, these flasks are used to give us a lot of resistances. Why? Because we're using a Melding to go very high on max res. We're getting 90 max res. What does that mean? If you do not have access to the flask, you just don't go Melding. You just take it off. All of a sudden, the res that was barely capped or just over capped with mage blood goes from being that to you having a lot of leeway in your resistances. Now you can play around with different things. What else does this solve? This uses a Storm Shroud and it takes chance to avoid shock. This means it's using this flask to solve ailments. Now we cannot do that. How else can we do that? We can either choose to go for the Ghastly Eye Jewels on your belt to use that to get 100% to use Storm Shroud, or you can decide to use Purity of Elements. If you decide to use Purity of Elements, you're going to have to play a lot around with the different skills in this POB to fit that. But if you just go for 100% on your Darkness Enthroned, you don't have to adjust too much. All you have to do is get with a high level of Darkness Enthroned, I think you can get like 50 something percent on each jewel, and that would just cap your chance to avoid shock very easily. Just one of them gets you very close. The second one overcaps you, so you can even use one of them here, and the second one can be on your tree because you don't need the effect, where we just remove the Melding, and that will also solve the same problem we solve with this flask. Then you look at the next flask, Bleed and Corrupted Blood. Steel Skin solves bleed. It doesn't really solve CBE, but we're going to be using a life flask for for bleed and CB immunity anyway, so we don't have to worry about that. Quicksilver is just movement speed. We can do without it, but we already have it on our current POB. And then again, resistances, we've already solved the resistance problem. So now we don't need a Mage Blood. We're fine as is. Mage Blood solving those issues will make it so we can get more of that damage, but like it's fine. And then you can go ahead and look at the different other portions of this build. It's using a Forbidden Flesh and Flame. Why is it using a Forbidden Flesh and Flame? In this case, we're using it to cap our block. Now we know we're going back to Missions of Sacrifice, so we know how we are capping block on this setup. Can we afford that? If the answer is no, and keep in mind this advice is going to be this build specifically, you can Forbidden Flesh and Flame 1, 2, or 3. Any one of those ascendancies you can without consequence. It's better to FNF these two because this increased duration is very comfortable, but it is fine to do it for any of the three and you're just in the same spot. But anyways, so in this case, are there ways we can potentially cap block without going FNF? Yes, there are ways. You could even decide to drop on natural strength entirely and go back to phase. That is an option you could take. I don't think that's a good option, but I think that's an option you could take, and you'd end up with less damage until you can afford it. Other options would be taking the reduced block and knowing that you are going for less block chance, you're going to be squishier as a result, but depending on the content you're doing, that might be a worthwhile trade-off. Other things you could do is you could look at wheels like this. This would involve changing the tree a bit and potentially going for leech here instead of like at the bottom left as an example. These are all changes you could make, but you could go for like this, which is chance to block while you're dual wielding. Just make sure you're not going for any nodes that specify using a shield, like this that specifies staff or shield, or this that specifies staff, or this that specifies shield, etc. Make sure the nodes you're taking do not say holding a shield and staff. This one says dual wielding, so it's safe, but be very, very aware of the wording they use and what they say is a condition for that block chance. Then I want you to think about what exactly does this build do? Why did we switch to from a shield to this? What is the purpose of it? And in this case, the reason is simple. The high budget goes for crits. Using crit is a very, very big damage multiplier. Straight up, it's huge. So because of that, we are going to be using Severed in Sleep, Ancient Skull, all these things to really push our crit chance high into the atmosphere, yada yada. Now, because of this, maybe if you're going on a budget, you only want to switch Severed in Sleep because your Ancient Skull is the reason, or your helmet is the reason you have your last Spectre because it is getting you +2. Those are things to consider. If that is the case, you might want to keep your helmet and accept that it's a damage loss, but it's still a step in the right direction because Severed in Sleep does also give Envy, which is another aura that would be very big defensive or offensive scaling. So these are the ways I want you to be thinking about build swaps. Genuinely look at the guide, see what exactly they are trying to do and how you can approach it, either with your budget if you can't afford it, or how much you need to afford the bare minimum to go into it and have a good time. Do not rush into a budget underprepared and then end up wrecking your character. That is never a good idea. But there are ways you can do it to move into the budget without potentially having all the pieces. And of course, there's nothing wrong in just waiting till you have all the pieces. Like right now, I have a decent amount of currency, so there's every possibility I can afford everything that I need except the Mage Blood. And there's also the possibility that I just buy the Mage Blood and I don't switch because the Mage Blood is not enough to switch. You need other things. I'm going to need the Severed in Sleep. I'm going to need the helmet. I'm going to need so many other things to make the build very well-rounded. So I hope this video goes to potentially make you rethink how you approach following build guides. If you are someone who only approaches it when you have all the currency, or vice versa, you find that you end up getting burnt whenever you try to upgrade and you end up having a worse quality of life depending on the build guide, depending on the build and all of that good stuff. So hopefully you were able to get value from this video. I will try to make more of these kind of videos in the future to potentially help a lot of the newer player questions I get, because I have received a lot of questions regarding this topic and how to upgrade and what to prioritize. I mean, you've probably seen it yourself. There are many people who are trying this game for the first time, and it's a very overwhelming game. So if I can do something to help, I definitely want to do that. Now, before I forget, there are going to be a lot of people who would ask in the comment section, how do you have 7 specters? Because it is a lot of support specters. Now, this is more of a high budget thing. It's one of the most it is the most expensive thing I think I currently have equipped on my character, and that is because I was able to pick up a level 4 congregation very early, and I think like day 3, and this costs like 18 divine, something like that. It's a very expensive one. If you don't have level 4 but you have level 1 through 3, there you're going to get 6 specters. How this works is it is a support gem that increases the maximum number of minions from the supporter skills, and it is linked to AG and Ray Spectre. AG it does nothing for, but AG and Ray Spectre are in the same links because I want them both to benefit from meat shield and minion life, so they're both here. So ignore the fact that it's linked to AG, it does nothing for him. But in any case, we have 5 specters, and when you do 5 times 1.42, which is the calculation to know how many specters you can have, you're going to land on 7 point something, and this game always rounds down regardless of if you get to 6.8, 6.9, going to round you down to 6 or 7 in this case. So there are set breakpoints to where you gain the extra specter, and in this build it is level 4 congregation. How I get my 5 specters are, I have a level 25 gem, so I get 3 specters from it. Like there's 1 specter at level 1, 1 specter at level 13 gem, and 1 specter at level 25 to give you 3 max. I'm also getting 1 max specter from anointing death attunement, so that's now 4 max, and then the 5th one is coming from my chest piece where it has a fractured +1 maximum number of specters. This I did not actually fracture myself, so the base is unideal, but it is fine. I wanted a pure armor base and I got it, so I can't complain. The important thing here is I got it fractured, so I crafted it fully from the suffixes up. That is how I get to 7 specters, just to answer any questions for people who are curious as to how I did that. It is by no means cheap, but it is worthwhile to do it. But anyways, if you haven't already, do consider liking and subscribing. It helps the channel out a lot. If you have any topics you want me to consider making a video on next, or just answering you in particular, feel free to drop them in the comments. I'm going to try to produce more educational content for the newer players, just because I realize that it's a very daunting game, and I am in a position where I think I can confidently speak on these topics. And even if you don't have a suggestion or a question, but you just want to say hi or ask a question about some build I have, or it doesn't have to be just dominating blow, again, the comment section is there, or you can stop by the stream. I've still been streaming as much as I can within reason, between real life commitments and stuff like that, but I am still there. And with all that said, thank you for watching.